I'd like to call the Wednesday, December 16th, 2020 Planning Commission hearing to order. Heather, can you please call the roll?
Mr. Granger, Mr. Boswell,
Here.
Mr. Klee, Ms. Macbeth,
Here.
Mr. Edwards,
Here.
Mr. Schaller,
Here.
Mr. Tarley.
Here.
Okay, so the first item of business that we have is the approval of minutes. We have minutes from our regular session in September, but since we have not had a hearing since September, we also have comp plan session minutes from September, October, and November. So, assuming that people remember all the details of some of those meetings, are there any corrections or adjustments, or to accept them as they've been presented?
Look good to me.
I'll move to accept the minutes of the regular meeting from 9/16 and the comp plan work session minutes from 9/23, 10/14, 10/28, and 11/18.
I second that motion.
Heather?
Mr. Boswell,
Aye.
Ms. Macbeth,
Aye.
Mr. Edwards,
Except I'm going to abstain from October 28th.
Mr. Schaller,
Aye.
Mr. Tarley.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. So we have no items on our consent agenda, but we do have a public hearing, PCR 20-024, request of Colonial Williamsburg Foundation for a special use permit. Erin, I see your signature at the end of this.
Yes, and I'm going to share the screen just to give you guys a PowerPoint presentation. Let's see here.
Can I interrupt? I see on the screen there's someone named Greg. Is that Mr. Granger? He seems to be muted.
Yes, it is.
Greg,
There
is
you go.
Yes. And
Thank you.
I think I missed an opportunity to say aye on the last vote.
Thank you. I'll mark you as present.
Okay, thank you. I was muted then.
So we'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone. The Colonial Williamsburg Foundation is requesting a special use permit to permanently remove 15 parking spaces and close the access on Nassau Street from the P4 parking lot in the downtown parking district. The applicant states that removing the parking spaces and closure of the entrance on Nassau Street will allow for future historic area programming. They're highlighted. So this is the parking area, and this is the current conditions, which I don't know how well that's showing up on your screen. And these are the two areas that they're proposing to remove parking from. As part of the request, the applicant is reconfiguring and improving the P4 parking lot. The reconfiguration will pick up one space in the overall layout and will result in the cumulative reduction of 140 spaces to 125 spaces. The property is located on 3 parcels. 310 Duke of Gloucester Street is in the downtown commercial area in the 2013 comprehensive plan. It's intended to promote a variety of business uses in the downtown planning area and includes Merchant Square and predominantly retail businesses areas adjacent to Colonial Williamsburg and the College of William and Mary. The properties at 345 West Francis Street and 105 South Nassau Street are designated as Colonial Williamsburg Historic Area, which is established to preserve, protect, and maintain the restored area's distinctive character and historic importance. Lands to the west are designated downtown commercial, with lands to the north being designated downtown commercial, Colonial Williamsburg, and Colonial Williamsburg Historic Area. Lands to the south and east are also designated Colonial Williamsburg Historic Area. The parcel of 310 West Duke of Gloucester Street is zoned downtown business B1. The property is located at 345 West Francis Street and 105 South Nassau Street are zoned Colonial Williamsburg Historic Area. The lands to the west are zoned downtown business B1, with lands to the North Zone, Downtown Business B1, and Colonial Williamsburg Historic Area CW. The lands to the south are zoned Colonial Williamsburg Historic Area CW as well. All 3 parcels are located in the downtown parking district. The zoning for the downtown parking district states the downtown parking district is established to recognize the special character of the downtown business area and the location of public parking facilities within the district. It is the intent of this section to establish the special parking requirements appropriate to the unique character of the downtown parking district. It continues, no off-street parking shall be required for non-residential uses located in the downtown parking area, except that the number of parking spaces existing on December 13th, 2018 in any parking lots included in the downtown parking master plan shall not be reduced without a special use permit approved by City Council. The Site Plan Review Committee met virtually on November 18th, 2020, and there was some discussion about the reconfiguration and layout of the proposed parking lot, including the accommodation for two-way traffic through the widened curb cut on Francis Street. There was also discussion regarding the removal of trees. The applicant stated that where feasible, existing trees would be left in place, but there would be some trees that would need to be removed due to their existing location and their size and the probability of root damage during the excavation and paving process. Stormwater will be handled through an underground storage system, and new landscaping will be installed as shown in the landscape, consisting of new trees, shrubs, ground cover, and other plant material to screen and enhance the parking lot. This request to remove 15 spaces in the P4 parking area. The parking spaces to be removed in the area, if approved, would be used to interpret a historic site. The applicant is reconfiguring the parking lot to accommodate an improved traffic flow, including two-way traffic. The proposal is in harmony with the comprehensive plan, the zoning district's intent and purpose, adjacent properties' character, and is served by adequate public services. The lighting, paving, and drainage improvements to the parking lot will significantly enhance our visitors' experience in the downtown area, as shown on the revised layout, which I'm going to scroll back up to. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission recommend to City Council approval of the request for the special use permit by the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation to reduce the number of parking spaces in the downtown parking area by 15 spaces in the P4 parking lot to interpret a historic site at 105 South Nassau Street. Staff also recommends that the Planning Commission approve the final site plan contingent upon the City Council approving the special use permit request. I can answer any questions that the Commission may have, and there are 2 representatives present in the meeting as well from Colonial Williamsburg.
Okay, thank you, Erin. This is a public hearing, so we'll be opening that up in a second. But before I do that, does anyone have a question for Erin? Or any clarifications for anyone who's on site plan that they feel need to be brought forward?
This is a permanent change.
Yes.
Okay. Should we consider rezoning that to Colonial Williamsburg support?
We could possibly. I think the only hiccup that we'll end up with is that it's on 3 parcels and not all 3 of the parcels are just support facilities.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if it will be beneficial or not.
So we got 2 historic structures up at the corner of Henry and Francis also.
Yeah. In this area.
Okay, curious.
Okay. Okay, so I will open the public hearing. And would the applicant like to come forward and address the commission?
Sure. I'll kick us off. This is Neil Elwine. And thank you, Erin, for your overview of the project, and good afternoon, everyone. I'll start by giving a little background, on the project from our perspective, and then talk a bit about the development of the parking lot, and then we'll turn it over to Jack Gary, and Jack will talk more about the significance of the historic sites. So our request to reduce the number of parking spaces in this lot began with recognizing that we had a significant opportunity to interpret the historic church site off of Nassau Street. And in that end, our first parking lot site plan was developed in response to just removing that Nassau Street parcel of the historic church site from the parking lot. And we had worked through a parking lot site plan in that regard and had lost 11 parking spaces. And that site plan was reviewed at the August Site Plan Review Committee meeting. Subsequent to that meeting, we had further archaeological investigation ongoing to determine if burials referenced in historic archives might in fact be located within the footprint of the parking lot. So we pursued further excavation and Jack's team in fact substantiated that burials did in fact exist under an area of the existing parking lot. So after determining that, we decided to pull the initial site plan and go back to the drawing board, so to speak, to see what we could develop and also respect the burials that we were finding under the existing lot. We really thought it was important to commemorate those burials and not to pave over them in the final result. So the extent of the burials, they're actually indicated on the site plan. They're kind of hard to see on the scale we have here, but they're at the northern end of that southern lot. And that area right up there, we had shown the extents of the burials with a dashed line, and then we decided to propose to erect a fence around the burials that would be held back 3 feet from the edge of the burials. And that fence will be used to designate the burial site, and we expect to put commemorative signage on it in the future. So in an effort then, you can see that, that really caused us to have to pull the parking lot, that southern parking lot, further south, and we were losing a large amount of parking spaces at that point. So we decided the best solution was to expand the south parking area, and we expanded it 42 feet to the west. And in doing so, by gaining some footprint back to the parking lot on the west side, we only lost 4 additional parking spaces. And that's what brought us to where we are today with the net total loss of 15 parking spaces. So we think that expanding the south lot towards the west, gave us a really good end result. It complemented widening that connector drive that connects the 2 parking lots, if you will, to where we have a 24-foot driveway that allows safe 2-way traffic between the lots. Some of you probably recall right now that driveway is quite narrow, and it's hazardous, somewhat hazardous, as cars are trying to go between the 2 lots in both directions simultaneously. So overall, just touching on some of the overall improvements that we're proposing for the parking lot, which are significant. We're going through it in its entirety, removing all the old wood curbing, removing all the old site lighting, and installing all new concrete curbing, grading, new sub base that is sloped so that we get proper drainage on the lot, and of course new asphalt paving. Significant drainage improvements. We ended up including a below grade stormwater detention system, which in review with city engineering and the civil engineers came up with improvements that will help significantly get rid of the drainage problems that we have existing on the parking lot. Significant landscape and lighting improvements, similar to what we recently did at the P2 lot in regards to site lighting. We'll have uplighting on the landscape. We'll include irrigation so that the landscape can be kept in good repair. The new site lighting is throughout the parking lot. We've added brick sidewalks for pedestrians' safety. Principally, we have a lot of volume of parking on the south lot, and to try to get those people up to the north and to the Duke of Gloucester, we proposed new brick sidewalk all the way from Francis Street on the west side of that south parking lot and extending all the way up to the Duke of Gloucester Street. We also improved the accessible parking spaces, configured them so that pedestrian access can get in and out of those accessible parking spaces without entering the traffic areas. So there's new brick sidewalks on the north of all the accessible parking spaces. So there's easy pathway to the historic area and to Merchant Square for those accessible spaces without ever having to risk being in any traffic areas. And then just in summary, I think as Aaron had stated, throughout the whole parking lot, we've got 24-foot drive aisles throughout. So there's no one-ways anywhere in the parking area. Both of the entrances now will, one off of Nassau and the existing off of Henry Street, will be two-way traffic both ways. And of course, anywhere you go in the parking lot is two-way traffic as well. So in summary, we think, we've greatly enhanced the parking lot. It will be much better for guest experience. And at the same time, retain the significant opportunity for interpreting the historic site and also commemorating the discovered burials in a good way. And so with that, I'll hand it off to Jack Gary, our Director of Archaeology, and Jack will talk to some of the historic sites.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. And Neil did a nice job of kind of summarizing the importance of these sites. As the removal of these spaces is going to give us the opportunity to preserve, interpret, and quite frankly, do the right thing about two important historic and archaeological resources in town. Most folks know about the historic First Baptist Church, which on the slide we've got up right now, the church stood on in the green rectangle there at the north end of what we refer to as Lot M, historic Lot M, which was a portion of the parking lot leading onto Nassau Street. The historic First Baptist Church of Williamsburg was the oldest. It's one of, if not the oldest, African-American churches in the country, founded in 1776. And while the congregation first met in secret on outlying plantations, they moved into town onto this piece of property by the early 19th century. And we know that they have a building there called the Baptist Meeting House as early as 1818 and possibly even earlier than that, standing on the lot outlined in green there. In 1834, that structure was demolished by a tornado. And then the church was able to rebuild in 1856, a brick church, which then stood for the next 100 years on that lot. Many people in town still remember and worshiped in that church. Colonial Williamsburg purchased it in 1954, helped the congregation move to Scotland Street, and then the church was demolished in 1956. And the parking lot was put on it in the 1960s. We've convened preliminary archaeological excavations in September, and those excavations were really targeted in this first phase to understand, is there anything left underneath this parking lot? And the answer that has come back is a resounding yes. There's a lot of archaeological resources associated with the church still there, including the foundations of the 1856 church, the foundations of an earlier building that may be related to the very first church building, as well as burials. We found at least one and possibly two burials in the church on the property as well. So the slide that you're seeing there shows the outlines of some of the things that we found for the church on the in the right-hand corner there. And our goal is to conduct a more extensive archaeological excavation that would give us the information needed to fully interpret and to recreate the earliest building that the church was worshiping in on this lot, and then use that as part of the Colonial Williamsburg guest experience to interpret this incredibly important church. Now, the second area that we discovered, which Neil talked about, the small cemetery, which is in the left-hand corner there. This was somewhat unexpected discovery. We had very vague references to there being burials somewhere in block 14, in the middle of this block, but no really good information about exactly where. So when we knew that we were going to be repaving this parking lot, we saw that as an opportunity to finally define and see where these burials were located. And in October, we removed sections of the asphalt and found at least 20 burials. We've been able to define the boundaries of those burials to the north, excuse me, not to the north, to the south, the east, and the west. They do probably extend to the north, but that would be outside of the parking lot and in areas that are protected currently. So who these people are is unclear. We're pretty certain that these burials were unmarked and have probably always been unmarked or marked with very temporary or impermanent materials. The reason I say that, of course, the parking lot got put on them because we didn't know they were there, but we also see some of the graves cutting into each other, meaning that when graves were added into the cemetery, people didn't know exactly where everyone was buried, and so they cut into the different burials. It does seem to have been outlined with a fence at one time, and so we see again the boundaries on the east, west, and south. That fence line respects those burials. So unmarked burials cutting into burials. It's likely that these are indigent or possibly even enslaved individuals that are buried here. We would not know this information until we actually excavated any of the burials themselves, which I will point out that we're only seeing the tops of the burial shafts here. No human remains were exposed as part of this project. And this now gives us the opportunity to commemorate these individuals, afford them some level of respect that they have not had in the past, and also to make this area accessible to do future research if the community ever wanted us to do that. So I'm very excited that we're able to do all of these projects, be able to commemorate both these sites in a way that is befitting of their importance.
Okay, thank you. So we are in an open public hearing right now. Is there anyone else who'd like to come forward and speak to the commission on this? I see at least one other name that I'm not familiar with.
Ms. Macbeth, there's no one that is called in to speak on this topic.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well then I will close the public hearing and turn this back to the commission. Are there any questions of the applicant? Are there any discussion points amongst the commissioners?
Don't have any questions right now, but I think the improvements to the parking lot are long overdue, and the plan looks really good. And I think that setting aside this area for commemoration and for interpretation is not only a great idea, it's necessary and a good thing to do. So I wholeheartedly support this.
I agree.
It seems like a good.
Sorry. Go ahead, Greg.
I was going to say, it seems like a good idea to me. I would love it if somebody can remind me where perhaps we've recently picked up or where we're going to pick up 15 spaces, so that when people say there's a shortage of parking and now we're taking away 15 spaces, where we can say, but we gained 15 here, or we're going to gain 20 here. Any guidance on that?
At this time, staff, I'm sorry, Carolyn, but I'm not aware of any new parking area.
That's correct.
Okay. I know the parking lot behind the bookstore, Casey's, that looks great, and I'm thrilled with it. Did we gain any parking spaces there?
We might have gained 2.
Okay. I'm just thinking about the I'm in favor of this, but I'm thinking about the real life conversation around the coffee shop where someone says, really, we're just taking away spaces. And we can say, but look at how nice the new parking lot is and how great that is. But it sure would be nice if we could say, we're going to gain 15 more through a redesign somewhere else. Because unfortunately, not enough people care about all the things that he just talked about. They care about the loss of 15 spaces.
Well, and I appreciate those comments, Greg. I guess my sense is that there's probably not a lot of appetite to pave over this area now that we know what's there and have it be a parking lot. But then also, I mean, some of the improvements for me, while the number may actually be less, the new design of the southern section of the paired area seems so improved that I actually could see more people actually parking in there, because previously it was sort of a, I don't know, loose form, free for all. And the access on Francis Street, I mean, I've lived in town for decades now, so how many times have I seen people almost pop an axle getting in and out of that access point? I think we're actually going to see that become a much more functional place. I mean, yes, I understand that we're losing some spots, but I don't even think this is between a rock and a hard place. I think it's pretty much an improvement and the right thing to do on other grounds.
Yeah, I would echo those comments. Sorry, Greg, I think I cut you off. I apologize.
No, that's all right. I was saying I agreed. I was just looking for good ammo for the people who say, but I want 15 spaces, because there will be those people. So
yeah,
go ahead.
No, I echo Elaine's comments there as well, and I think in addition to emphasizing to people during those conversations the benefits of the project, right, the preservation of the graves themselves, the archaeological site, in addition to the parking lot improvements, but also pointing people back to the downtown parking study and saying, well, maybe we can disagree around the edges of some of how parking spaces were calculated, but the overall takeaway is that there is an abundance of downtown parking, even if we don't perceive it as being that way. And there are bigger, longer term things that the city's doing to try to address some of that. And that's something that we as the Planning Commission are going to stay engaged in. Again, I think that even the point that Elaine made, right, you could think about the lighting improvements as being something that at night means this is a more utilized parking space, because people feel comfortable walking back from dinner, walking back from shopping, and accessing this space after dark. And that's particularly important in the winter.
I agree with the comments about how significant this project is, and I think that significance, burials in the church, and all of that pales in comparison with the perception about parking. And I think this design, these improvements to the lot, that's hugely significant. I've seen so many issues of sort of parking rage in those lots, as people get very frustrated. I almost got hit by a very large truck coming flying out of there just a couple of days ago, mostly on the grass. I mean, there's so many improvements here that are going to make parking there easier, and as Mr. Shaw said, safer. So I think I will, if I'm Mr. Granger, if I'm in that conversation with somebody at the coffee shop, I'll say, well, I think we're not talking about Goodwin Plaza right now, so let's just move forward. We have a really important project here that a nationally significant project that's already brought a lot of national attention to Williamsburg, and I think one of our overall goals is to increase that visibility and get people interested. So this project certainly does that, and the loss of spaces, I think, is offset by the improvements.
Are there any other comments by commissioners? Or
yes,
perhaps?
I'll briefly comment. I reviewed this at the site plan review committee, and I liked all the changes that had been implemented at that time. The design is better, the lighting is better, the entrances are better. But what is most important to me, and I appreciate, I hadn't had Mr. Gary present at the site plan or the Planning Commission, and I fortunate review of this project has been stated long overdue and much needed, and a welcome addition to the Colonial Williamsburg programming and research.
Is there a motion?
I move that we, does anyone interrupt someone? I move that we recommend to City Council that they approve PCR 20-24 as presented.
Second.
Heather?
Mr. Granger,
Aye.
Mr. Boswell,
Aye.
Ms. Macbeth,
Aye.
Mr. Edwards,
Aye.
Mr. Schaller,
Aye.
Mr. Tarley.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. And thank you.
Elaine, I have, I think staff's recommendation was to approve the site plan also contingent upon city council approving the special use permit. So does the commission want to vote on that?
Yeah, I mean, I was taking it that we were approving the whole package. If we didn't articulate those two parts is.
Okay.
I believe we voted on the full package. Is that what everyone else believes? Do we need to
Yes.
state this out more fully?
That was
Okay.
my intention.
Yes.
Right.
Okay,
Just make that clear.
yes. Yes, the whole package. Thank you. Okay. Okay, so Neil, Jack, thank you for coming.
Yes, all right. Thank you all. Appreciate the board's comments and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, well then this brings us to our open forum, and I've been told there's nobody wanting to speak. Site plans, unfinished business, new business, etc. Our main item then is in the other business category, which is the review of our draft 3 of our Chapter 5 comprehensive plan neighborhoods.
Yes, basically, Madam Chair, I took the neighborhood chapter and updated all the information as to the charts and the information that you see outlined in red, because the information we had in draft 2 was based on last year's data. So the neighborhood chart and the other information reflects the current data. The neighborhoods chart, it comes from, we do that once a year. It's based on the fiscal year. So it goes from July the 1st to June the 30th. So that's what you see in that chart. And unless the commission has any comments on any of the specific pages, I think I've filled in the pictures to make it look more like the final product. And I also did at the end of the chapter, the recommendations like we did in the previous chapters, so that we have it all in one spot, even though certain sections mention the recommendations. So unless the commission wants to see certain information or certain pages, I'll take comments.
Carolyn, I'd like to bring up table 5-1. We talked. I asked about this at a prior work session, and you gave me the information on how the table is interpreted, and I just suggested that based on a sort of a spot check of the neighborhood I live in, I felt the number was off substantially, and it turns out it is actually off substantially. And so you and I have been having kind of a back and forth on how to approach that, how to get that information correct. I would like just the commission to briefly look at that. And speaking specifically about Holly Hills, the data, the public data, the problem with the public data and the way it's interpreted is that a good number of people in Holly Hills don't list their home address on the property card. They have a post office box, or they have the property is owned by a revocable trust, and they have their CPA or their attorney's address listed for, so that's where the tax bill goes, and things like that. And so then the interpretation is, if that's the case, it must be renter occupied. The house must be renter occupied, and that's just that. I think it's important that we don't overstate the number of renter occupied units in all of our neighborhoods. We're able to get that corrected for Holly Hills. But I have some concerns. I know in Yorkshire, I was speaking with Robert Lane today, about this, and he said he's not aware of any rentals in Yorkshire, even though this shows there's one in Yorkshire. Mr. Tarley may have better information about that. But I understand the staff. The issue with the staff can't check with every one of these every year and that sort of thing. But still, at the same time, if we know we have incorrect information here, we need to be able to. There needs to be some mechanism to be able to fix it. So I just like to bring that up and see what ideas we can come up with on that.
That's a good point, because I also, the one thing that I noted in reading through this again was on the first page, when the complexes and commercial corridors are factored in, the owner occupancy rate determined by city analysis 39% with 61% rental occupancy. I really don't understand complex. It's going to be 100%. That's the nature of an apartment, and I don't understand the purpose of that kind of data. It doesn't make us. I think this is Mr. Boswell's was implying is that doesn't make us look better. So and if it's not helpful. Data, and if it's not,
I think we lost you, John.
Do you hear me now?
I would suggest that people mute and unmute themselves, because I think there's too many open mics that we're having some feedback.
I'm sorry. Did you hear anything?
I heard the point about it was being broken up, that it's unhelpful to provide data that has, these apartment complexes that's 100% obviously rental, that we want to have the to parse it out. But I stand back to let you make your own point.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, that was towards the end of my commentary, was just simply that, as was stated by Mr. Boswell, or implied, that if the data is not correct, what's the reason to include it? And if the data is not helpful, what's the reason to include it? And because I'm assuming that higher rental occupancy versus owner occupancy is a bad thing.
I think in neighborhoods, like Holly Hills in Yorkshire, and there's so many that even in the neighborhoods, we have a committee. We have a lot of concern over rentals in the Burns and some of those Indian Springs and those neighborhoods. And I think Mr. Tarley, I think that presumption is correct, that the city officially sees renter occupied houses in neighborhoods like that as a challenge, as a problem.
Well,
that's separate and apart from the interpretation of the data, where you really actually do have owners living there, but we're putting in the plan that it's renter occupied when they're actually owner occupied. That's sort of two interconnecting issues there.
Right. That was kind of what I was referring to.
So what's the commission's feel? You want to take the chart out?
I guess I'm of the opinion that I'd rather have imperfect data with a caveat than no data at all. I mean, I think, even just if we just look at the Burns Lane example, I was surprised at how many of them are, again, knowing what our metric is, but how many of them are actually owner occupied. And I think that the ones that are listed as renter occupied in neighborhoods that we know traditionally don't have rental properties are so small that they're almost not statistically insignificant, but not worth emphasizing too much in any sort of discussion, but still make for a useful tool. I mean, to me, the takeaway from looking at Holly Hills is it's dominantly owner occupied. Likewise with Yorkshire. And as long as we make that caveat clear, which we do on the page before the chart, I don't personally have an issue with this.
I would
And I-
also that the neighborhoods that are in the rental inspection district, such as Burns Lane and Indian Springs, and those, the figures are pretty darn close because they have to get a rental inspection. It's the neighborhoods such as Holly Hills and Yorkshire and Skipwith and some of the other neighborhoods that don't get rental inspection, where you have to use the best numbers you have in front of you. And it's like I told Mr. Boswell, I'm happy to correct the information in Holly Hills if I can get the information from individuals, and I'll offer that to all the other neighborhoods also. What that entails is I change it in the planning database, but I also need to change it in the assessor's database and in the GIS database. So it's important that the information I get is correct because it affects not only planning, but other departments. So that's why we've always had that caveat. We've got at least 10 years of data going back for neighborhoods, and I get that request at least once a year from council and other members as to how the neighborhoods are going as far as rental versus owner. So, and this chart's been in the plan for some time now, but I believe I would say Justin is correct in that it's important to look at it and say, you know, don't quote there's 13 in Holly Hills, but the majority of homes in Holly Hills, it's nice to know that they are owner occupied, not renter occupied. It sort of gives you an idea of what your neighborhoods are.
Well, when you're off by that big of a factor, I know, you know, in the aggregate, the statistic is not substantial, but when you look at it, when you're looking at things, you know, neighborhood by neighborhood, it really, you know, when you're off by 10, when you have 13 and you're off by 10, you know, and then you extrapolate that to the other neighborhoods, where, because it's not, you know, the situation is not unique to Holly Hills by any means. I mean, a lot of people have post office boxes and railroad trusts and that sort of thing. So I just wonder about, there are a couple of things to Mr. Charlotte's point. I 100% agree that these are really useful numbers, but you know, I'm just saying that I think we should be as accurate as possible. I question, you know, the renter occupied, because that's kind of an extrapolation. You know, if it's not owner occupied, well, it must be rental occupied, but that's certainly not true. So I wonder about that designation, and also about the totals. To Mr. Tarley's point, just sort of lumping in the and I think we had this conversation about another chart somewhere. It's all running together now, but about these totals and these columns that really don't seem to, you know, like the totals at the bottom of these columns. I'm not sure what information that really gives us. So I would be happy with, you know, clarifying that we've, you know, tried to be as accurate as possible if we have specific information from the neighborhoods, but if not, it's based on this, you know, this extrapolation of or this conclusion based on the addresses, something like that. Because when I look at that, if I'm looking at a specific neighborhood and I see, you know, the higher the rental percentage, you know, the more of a concern it is. So I guess lumping together, you know, Colonial Town with Holly Hills and adding those two together and looking at, you know, I'm not sure, to Mr. Charlie's point, where that gets us. But the neighborhoods themselves, if we can get each one as accurate as possible, then I think we're going to have a better representation here in this chart and in the other places that number would be affected.
Yeah, so a couple of things. The one thing to me that seems to not add anything that you were just mentioning, James, is the totals of each column or the three compartments there. I don't see how that adds anything because it's just summarizing that part of the alphabet, which has nothing to do with any kind of a summary measure. So I don't think the totals line really should be there. I don't think it adds anything.
Okay, I can take that out. That's not a problem.
But I mean, but you know, this is just my comments. If other people feel differently about that, but I didn't even think about that way of thinking about it. Where I somehow find myself arguing both sides of the points, Justin's side and John's side on this. Like, more information and better information is really great. And if there is a way that it can be provided to the city at, sort of low cost from neighborhoods, from reliable sources that can allow us to have better data, that's great. But as Carolyn was saying, it's not just simply one thing, but there's many areas where this would need to be adjusted. Holly Hills, Yorkshire, a few of these places have homeowners associations where there's somebody who could potentially provide that information from reliable sources or something like that. But the super majority of our neighborhoods in the city do not have homeowners associations. So my sense is like we're updating public documents with private information, and I've had a conversation earlier today with James that I guess it's not quite that strong, but that's, I'm trying to get my head around this. But I guess my sense is that somehow maybe potentially more privileged neighborhoods are going to have the time and resources to provide this information that will make their neighborhoods look better. And so I have a sense that I don't want to be in a thing where we're somehow in some way advantaging some neighborhoods, advantaging them maybe with regard to, the ideas of the ability to get better loan rates or something like that, because they're seen as not being rentals, and other places may just have everybody in a trust, but they don't know to raise their hand. So I'm cautious about manipulating public data unless we make it well known to all the neighborhoods that if you really want to bring your information, bring it forward. So at least there's a level playing ground there.
Yeah, and several things come to mind there, that if the city publishes this interpretation, because it's different from the data itself. The data is the address. There's a property address and there's the owner's mailing address, and that's the city record. And nobody's suggesting anything about that. But what I'm saying is that you're taking, we the city are taking that information and interpreting it in a certain way that overall is detrimental to the city. It may not be statistically huge, but it is still detrimental by showing that these neighborhoods, and I'm only talking about Holly Hills because I have access to that information, but I don't see it. I don't see it as a privileged versus not privileged, or we just happen to have this data, and we know that renter occupied, and maybe it's the designation of renter occupied. Maybe there's a way to redesignate that to something else. I don't know, and to be specific. But again, it's not the public data. It's the way this table and the other related interpretations misstate the public data, right? Because what we're doing here is misstating the public data when we know it's wrong, when we know the interpretation of the data is wrong. So I'm looking at that distinction between the data itself and the way we are representing that data in this comp plan.
Okay, so I think we all vote for better information, and I guess my sense is how should we best advise Carolyn and her staff to work with this? I like having this information. I don't really care that much about knowing that there's 100% occupancy by renters in places that I know are rental communities. But I think the other information as a whole is helpful. I think the idea that we're basically 60-40 owner occupied over rental occupied of single family houses and condos and townhouses and things like that versus apartments is good information. But I think at this point, Carolyn needs us to have like a motion, and a motion internal to the process of how we're editing this, for either for us to do work or for someone to get the information.
Would it be enough if we just put estimated? and kind of discussed what the methodology was? Because it's never going to be 100%.
It's never going to be 100%. That's absolutely right. I mean, what I was thinking was because the majority of it is right. Of course, a lot of these are as Elaine said, a lot of these are just rental apartment complexes to begin with. And I think that, you know, I'm not disagreeing really. I'm not disagreeing with anybody about it. I'm just saying that that where we have actual numbers rather than estimates or guesses, because these are really just guesses about what the owner is up to. I think we should say so, and I think that could be added to that disclosure about how the numbers are calculated, right? I mean, we could just if you have the actual numbers, because I was in contact with an officer of our HOA, and he's going to provide, or I think already has provided, the actual numbers for Holly Hills. I think that can be done fairly easily because they don't know that these numbers are wrong. It was a surprise to, and it was Robert Lane, who all of you know, who I was talking to today about this yesterday. And he was like, "What? They're putting that in the comp plan? They can't do that." Well, they're doing it and have been doing it. So I think if we have a representation that how the numbers are calculated, with the exception that if actual numbers have been provided by the neighborhoods or the associations in those neighborhoods, the actual numbers will be used instead of the estimates, or something along those lines. Just sort of a sentence, you know.
So
Go ahead, John, or Justin, whoever.
So I guess I think there's a number of points in the air, but I guess one thing that John's comment, I think, could help with here is what to do, not just in the text, but on the chart itself. And so I think something like renaming the columns estimated or likely owner occupied and likely renter occupied or likely non-owner occupied, however we want to word that. I don't know if the rest of the commission would be open to that as one upfront caveat. I guess I echo Elaine's equity or equality concerns about allowing individual neighborhoods, particularly those that do have HOAs and those that don't, who just simply can't, to change or modify these numbers. I think it's actually better if we allow all the data to be from the same source, which is the city data. And I understand your point, James, that the HOA wants this to be accurately reflected, but then that means that, for example, I can't dispute and would be very surprised if it's not about 50-50 here in Highland Park for rentals, but there's no way anyone, we've got a civic organization, but we're not, civic organizations don't keep that kind of data, right? So I think there's a huge equity there, right, issue there. If you look at the demographics of Highland Park compared to Holly Hills, both in terms of income and racial makeup, things like that, there's this huge equity issue where we're potentially amplifying structural issues that are already present, and we're doing this in an official city document. I have really strong concerns about that.
Well, help me understand then, because all I'm asking is that it just be accurate where we have knowledge, where we have the information, and it overall, it's a city issue. And it furthers a city goal of not having as much rental. I mean, I understand the underlying reasons, but Holly Hills has an HOA, frankly, because it's newer. I mean, it's newer. The older subdivisions, even very nice, nice neighborhoods, it just wasn't done. They just didn't have homeowner associations. 40, 50 years ago, they thought it was communism in a way, back then. So I recognize that there are discrepancies, but I don't see how they're socially and economic differential, but I'm not sure that factors into accuracy. I mean, it's just a matter of we have the number, so why not use it?
Yeah,
I don't think it negatively by being accurate in one neighborhood. I don't see how it casts any aspersions or says anything negative about that other. If you're using that data and you say where the data where you're getting it, as we do, I guess I don't see how it negatively impacts the perception of those neighborhoods, because you're not changing that data. That data is exactly the same data as it would be either way. That percentage is exactly the same. whether you fix this neighborhood over there based on accurate information, you still have the exact same, it's not a comparison. In other words, you're not, it's not a ratio, and you're not comparing this neighborhood to that neighborhood.
I guess I would
That's my
disagree.
piece.
Yeah, I guess I would disagree with that, because if you're changing the mean and the median by changing some of the numbers at either end, then the comparison to that average is changing. And so as someone who teaches mathematical economics, I guess I have a problem with that. But
we're not putting, there aren't percentages. Are there?
Yes, there are.
I mean, is there a comparison somewhere? Are we doing?
Well, I mean, if you're
and
changing some of the numbers so that the omnibus number, the total number changes so that your neighborhood is either further away in the negative from that average, then that would have, a disparity issue to be considered.
But we're not
I think we're
calculating.
getting really into details here. I guess
Yeah, we're getting too far.
trying to come to some sense, because I also, as an economist, really want good data. And so if we have good data, it's good to use it. But I think that if we're going to start manipulating this chart, unfortunately, it's at draft 3, and I know that Carolyn would like to actually put this whole thing to bed at some point in the very near future, is at the minimum, looking for some glimpse of hope here. The only thing that comes to my mind is that potentially through the neighborhood council, we can make an announcement, because I think that the neighborhood council is broadly represented across the neighborhoods in the city. Skipwith, Highland Park, as well as Holly Hills and other places. I mean, that we can send out through Jim Josephs and his network that we're working on this, and are these numbers, good numbers for your neighborhood, and at least let people have a sense. And then if we get information back, I guess I would feel that it's more reflective, especially given the way we're having to have public meetings at this point through the Brady Bunch of you all on my computer screen while I'm in my office on the 4th floor of a locked building, so no one's here, So, I mean, how does that seem like some middle ground of gathering information and letting more people into the party of being able to provide information?
If I may, I just have a sense of trying to shorten old approach to this particular issue into new information, because at the last time there was a comprehensive plan, we look at all of the apartment complexes and conversions of hotels to apartments. The data had, we look at that percentage that I don't understand, like why we highlight it, that we have 61% rental occupancy compared to the 2010 census. That makes sense. We have more apartments now. We've a lot more rental space. So I guess I go back to, why is this data important to be in the comp plan?
Carolyn, maybe that's you.
Yeah, I think basically this was information that was in the previous plan. So what staff did was update the information to match what was in the previous plan. So if the commission doesn't want that type of information in there, we can always take out that sentence or two and just list the difference between the current rental and the census count, because I think it was the census count that had us pretty high in rentals, when in fact we were more owner occupied, and that was important to note.
Yeah, and I guess that's my question. It was important to note then, because there were lots of concerns about rentals in neighborhoods and student rentals specifically. And I have to believe that while it's still a touchy subject for many neighborhoods, I just go, why is it there? Why do we need it? How does this move help us plan for the city's future? Maybe it did the last time. Is it still relevant now? That's my only question. I don't mean to throw a monkey wrench in the whole process. Again, late to the game, but I just look at it and say, how important really is this information for the
To me, it helps characterize the overall housing stock and the distribution of housing across the community, right? I think there's a positive spin to it, right? I think we all know the history and the conversation around student rental. But even though we know not all these apartments are affordable, if we look at it from an affordability standpoint or a job mobility standpoint, housing for particularly younger adults and families, right? That's what rentals can be, people that are making big life transitions. And so I think in some ways it's something, we don't need to emphasize it in this way, but it's information that could be helpful in saying, this is a community that particularly in the last 5 or 6 years has really, or even decade, has expanded its rental capacity and is excited to welcome folks that are looking for that transitional period of time or just looking for a more affordable option.
Would it make sense then under that thought to separate out multifamily neighborhoods or complexes from the single family complexes?
I think it would make sense to separate out the ones that are rental only, and that there's not the option for owner occupied. I mean, that would make a big difference, I think.
Do you mean to take them out altogether?
No, just segregate. Just in the same, present the same information.
You kind of got that idea.
Sorry.
I said when you see 100%, then you kind of know that's what they are. Putting them into a separate category, I don't really see the point. But I see this all as data that's useful, and it's data that's useful in a comparison way. Any data is useful. And I think that, I think a caveat saying how it was derived is probably what we need, but I don't see throwing out the whole data. I agree with Justin's point in that it gives us an overall feel of the city that you wouldn't get from another way. That's my 2 cents.
I think they're already kind of marked and segregated with the color coding that Carolyn and Aaron have done already. So I think we were already at a middle ground on that particular point.
I think that answers your question, Elaine.
Okay, so we're at page 2 of chapter 5. Ready to dig any deeper?
I love the rest of it.
Yeah, the updates were great. I like the summary of everything at the end. That kind of brings it all together. That was really helpful. And it seems like we've done a good job in the past of doing our zoning, since we don't really recommend hardly any changes to zoning except for one small area, which wasn't it. Overall, I think it's a very, very useful document.
Okay, great. So any final chapter 5 comments before we, I guess, go on? Not seeing any. Okay. Then there's no one here who wants to make a comment. There's no other things. So we have our information items in our packet. I want to just highlight a couple of things. The final information item is the annual report for 2020, which I assume will be updated with results from today's meeting. So it is in a nearly done but draft document. So please review that in case you think there's any changes that need to be done there. We do have a public hearing in January for the capital improvement program, and as is our plan, we have our January work session on the capital improvement program as well. Since both of those dates are in the arc of the governor's restrictions that are currently in place through January 31st. I'm assuming that they are both going to be done in this virtual manner.
That's correct.
Then the final question I just have to Carolyn is that then moving forward into January, hey Jeff, we're about to end the meeting, so you came in on perfect timing here. So, but in moving into January, where are we on the comp plan as we think about trying to, tie a ribbon around this? Obviously, we want to have some public hearing time that's truly public hearing before we end it, but how many more of these kinds of meetings do you expect?
I'm thinking that in January for the regular meeting, I think I will put in the land use chapter, which is basically the existing land use map, the proposed comp plan map, and updating the land use information, which I'm close to finishing right now. So if it's okay with the commission, I will do that as part of the work session in January along with the CIP. And other than that, staff and I are finalizing all the chapters, getting the information together. And what I'll do is just email those out to the commission as we discussed at the last meeting to get any final little corrections or so forth on those. I don't think we need to have any more work sessions on those minor little changes. And then wait till when we can advertise it for public hearing.
So Carolyn, I guess I missed the beat on part of that. I thought you were first saying that you were going to give us a chapter to look at our hearing, the January 20th meeting.
Yeah, I think I'll probably give it to you at the work session meeting, which is the CIP one at the end of the month.
Okay.
It's just the land use chapter. I think that one is pretty easy for the commission to look at. It's basically the existing land use data that needs to be updated, and I've almost finished that. It'll be the land use data, the proposed comp plan map, and the existing land use map that'll be in that. And I think that's pretty easy to look at. Other than that, I think we're done with with all the chapters, except for staff doing the final reviews on those. And I think we agreed last month to just those out to the commission to see if the pictures and all the data in there is correct, the commission's standards. And we'll just wait to see when we can do the public hearings on the whole comp plan.
Carolyn, where are we? I've lost track of Mr. Tarley's suggestion about a road diet on Jamestown Road between Walsingham and
Yes,
Fort Hill. Where are we on that?
I added that to the transportation chapter. Once I finish putting the pictures in, I'll send that out to the commission and see if the little changes that the commission wanted meets what you expected those chapters to look like. But I did add that to the transportation chapter.
Thanks.
Okay. So if the world were perfect, we'd actually be able to have a public hearing in February and then a final vote in March. But I gather, are we still on track that when we can actually meet, it will take us 2 meetings, one meeting to present and then probably
Right.
having some changes and then a second meeting. So it's still a 2-month thing when we eventually get it on our docket.
Yes, I think so.
Okay. Okay, well, are there any other items to be brought up for the good of the crowd here? Okay, not seeing anyone unmuting themselves or starting to speak. So I will close our meeting and everyone have a good holiday season. We'll see you in the new year.